5,000 years ago. No skyscrapers, no cars, no cities as we know them today. Just rivers, deserts, and small villages scattered across the land. But in one place, something extraordinary was happening. Along the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, humans were building the first cities in history. They were inventing writing, laws, and stories that would echo for thousands of years. They were creating civilization itself. This is the story of Sumer, the land where history truly begins. A story of kings, gods, cities, and the people who shaped the very foundations of human society.
Close your eyes
and imagine a world more than
back.
5,000 years ago. A world without cars, skyscrapers, or modern cities. Most people lived in small villages, farming, hunting, and struggling to survive from one season to the next. Life was shaped by rivers and the changing seasons, and the desert was never far away, waiting to test those who lived near it. Along the winding paths of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, something remarkable was happening. Humans were beginning to build the first real cities. This land, later known as Mesopotamia, or the land between rivers, became the birthplace of civilization. Its earliest and most influential society was called Sumer. Sumer was where ordinary villages transformed into powerful city-states, each with its own ruler, temple, and patron god. This is where humans invented writing, law, organized religion, monumental architecture, and even literature that would echo for thousands of years. Stories like the Epic of Gilgamesh were born here, capturing the dreams, fears, and ambitions of early humans. Summers scorched the plains, rain was rare, and floods could strike without warning. Farmers learned to work together to dig canals, build dikes, and channel water to their fields. Without these innovations, crops would fail, and entire villages could face starvation. By around 3500 BCE, villages had grown into bustling towns, and towns into sprawling cities. The most famous city, Uruk, may have been the largest in the world at the time, with 40 to 50,000 people. Its streets were filled with houses, markets, temples, and workshops. Craftsmen shaped clay and stone, scribes etched cuneiform on tablets, and rulers oversaw the city's complex life. Walking through the streets of Uruk, one could see children chasing goats along narrow alleys, merchants shouting prices for grain, pottery, and cloth, and bakers pulling fresh bread from their ovens. Scribes hurried to record the city's wealth, deals, and daily events on clay tablets. The city was alive, vibrant, and Ur, Lagash, Kish, and Nippur. Each city had its own culture, its own temple, and its own god. While city-states sometimes competed, through trade or conflict, they shared technology, religion, and knowledge, forming the first network of human civilization. Sumerians were more than farmers. They were builders, artists, traders, and musicians. They grew barley, wheat, and dates, herded sheep and goats, fished in the rivers, and hunted birds for food. Marketplaces buzzed with activity. Artisans sold pottery, jewelry, and textiles. Storytellers recited tales of heroes and gods, and musicians played lyres and flutes to accompany the rhythm of daily life. Art and craftsmanship were everywhere. Stone carvings depicted gods, kings, and heroes. Pottery illustrated battles, hunts, and festivals. Textiles were dyed in bright colors, woven into patterns representing beauty, status, and meaning. Every object told a story, connecting people to their gods, every aspect of life. Each city worshipped a patron god: Anu, the god of the sky; Enlil, god of air and storms; Enki, god of water and wisdom; and Inanna, goddess of love and war. Priests performed rituals, offered sacrifices, and interpreted signs from the gods. People believed that floods, droughts, famine, and disease were messages from the divine. Keeping the gods happy was essential, for their favor meant survival. Imagine a festival day in Uruk. Drums echoed through the streets, children danced with garlands of flowers, and priests climbed the massive steps of the ziggurat, carrying offerings to the gods at the top. Merchants and farmers gathered to celebrate the harvest, while storytellers sang tales of ancient heroes. Music, laughter, and devotion filled the city, connecting the people with their past and their divine protectors. City-states were ruled by kings called Lugal, meaning big man. Some were warriors, others wise leaders or priests. They built canals, walls, temples, and palaces. They led armies, negotiated alliances, and sometimes faced rebellion, Yet even kings could not rule alone. Councils of elders, priests, and influential citizens shared power and helped make important decisions. Despite conflicts and natural challenges, Sumerians developed systems of measurement, accounting, and trade. They exchanged grain, tools, pottery, and luxury items not only within Mesopotamia but also with distant lands, including Elam and the Indus Valley. Through cities, canals, and innovation, they laid the foundation for what we now call civilization. Walking through Uruk in your imagination, you can hear flutes and lyres, smell fresh bread and wet clay, and see children playing while merchants haggle over goods. Scribes etch tablets while people move through bustling streets. This was the heartbeat of the first cities in human history, and yet, this was only the beginning. These cities would grow, flourish, face challenges, and shape the story of humanity. The first thing that would catch your eye would not be the houses or the markets, but the temple. Rising high above the streets stood the ziggurat, a massive, step tower made of mud brick. From far away, these ziggurats looked like stairways to the heavens, symbols of human ambition to reach the gods. Each ziggurat was dedicated to a city's patron deity. In Ur, the great ziggurat honored the moon god, Nanna. In Uruk, the towering structure was devoted to Inanna, the goddess of love and war. These temples were not only places of worship but also centers of administration, economy, and education. Priests kept records of harvests, offerings, and trades, ensuring that both gods and people received their share. The temple complex was alive with activity. Farmers brought grain, fruits, and animals as offerings. Priests performed daily rituals, burning incense, pouring libations, and chanting hymns to the gods. Children carried baskets of dates, while craftsmen delivered jewelry and tools as sacred gifts. Every day, the temple reminded people that their lives were tied to more than a spiritual center. It was the heart of the city's economy. Priests managed land, controlled storage of grain, and distributed resources in times of famine. They oversaw construction projects, organized workers, and acted as guardians of knowledge. Temples held libraries of clay tablets where scribes practiced writing, recording everything from trade contracts to hymns and myths. Imagine standing in the temple courtyard. The air is filled with the scent of burning incense. A priest in long robes reads prayers to the gods while scribes nearby press symbols into wet clay tablets. Behind them, workers carry heavy sacks of grain into storage rooms, while shepherds lead sheep to be sacrificed. The temple was not a quiet, distant place. It was the beating heart of the city, where heaven and earth met through ritual. The Sumerians was writing. Around 3200 BCE, they began to carve simple marks into clay tablets. At first, these symbols represented goods and numbers, a jar of oil, a sack of grain, a herd of sheep. But over time, these marks evolved into cuneiform, one of the first writing systems in the world. Cuneiform tablets looked like rows of wedge-shaped marks pressed into soft clay with a reed stylus. At first, they were purely practical, keeping track of taxes, harvests, and trade. But soon, writing began to record laws, letters, hymns, and even stories. For the first time, human memory could exist outside the mind, captured in clay for future generations. The Epic of Gilgamesh, one of humanity's earliest works of literature, was written in this script. On clay tablets, it told of a mighty king's adventures, his battles with monsters, his friendship with Enkidu, and his search for immortality. Through such stories, we glimpse the hopes, fears, and wisdom of people who lived 5,000 years. The scribe. Not everyone could learn cuneiform, for it required years of training. Schools, called edibas or tablet houses, trained boys usually from wealthy families to master the art of writing. Inside these schools, students sat cross-legged, copying symbols over and over into clay tablets while teachers scolded or praised their progress. A day in the life of a student was not easy. They woke at dawn, carried clay tablets and reeds to school, and spent long hours practicing under strict supervision. Mistakes meant punishments, but success promised honor, respect, and a future in government, temples, or trade. Scribes were essential to society, preserving contracts, myths, prayers, and knowledge for generations. Imagine sitting in one of these schools. The sound of reeds scratching clay echoes through the room. The air is thick with dust and heat. A stern teacher watches as students press wedge after wedge into the soft tablets. Some whisper quietly, others groan in frustration, while a few smile proudly as they master a new sign. These were the first classrooms in history, shaping the scholars of Mesopotamia. Kingship was seen as a gift from the gods. The people believed that rulers were chosen by the divine to protect their cities, lead armies, and maintain justice. Kings were not gods themselves, but they were the bridge between heaven and earth. They led great building projects, organized irrigation, and ensured that temples honored the deities properly. One of the earliest known kings was Gilgamesh of Uruk. His name became legendary, remembered not only as a powerful ruler but also as the hero of epic tales. Other kings left their mark through monuments and inscriptions, carving their achievements into stone to be remembered for centuries. A king's duty was heavy: to defend the people from enemies, to provide order in a chaotic world, and to guarantee that justice was served. Imagine standing in a royal palace. The walls are decorated with carved reliefs showing battles, hunting scenes, and processions of soldiers. The king sits on a high throne, wearing a heavy crown and fine robes. Advisors whisper in his ear, while guards armed with spears stand ready nearby. The presence of the king was both inspiring and intimidating, reminding everyone that contributions of Mesopotamian kings was the establishment of written laws. The most famous example is the Code of Hammurabi, created by King Hammurabi of Babylon around 1750 BCE. This code was carved into a tall black stone pillar, with hundreds of laws inscribed for all to see. The Code of Hammurabi covered every part of daily life: trade, property, family, crime, and justice. Some laws were harsh, following the principle of eye for an eye. For example, if a builder constructed a house that later collapsed and killed the owner, the builder himself could be put to death. Yet other laws protected the weak, widows, orphans, and the poor. It was one of the first times in history that rules were made clear and public, so people would know the consequences of their actions. Picture a bustling Babylonian square. Citizens gather around the tall stone pillar, squinting at the inscriptions. A scribe reads the laws aloud to the crowd. Merchants listen carefully, farmers nod in agreement, and children whisper to each other about the strict punishments. This was more than law, it was order carved into stone, shaping society for centuries. Most people in Mesopotamia lived simple, hard-working lives. Farmers made up the largest part of the population. They rose with the sun, worked in the fields, dug irrigation canals, and harvested grain. The rivers provided rich soil, but floods and droughts could quickly destroy their work. Life was fragile, dependent on nature's balance. Craftsmen shaped clay into pottery, carved wood into tools, and hammered bronze into weapons and jewelry. Merchants traveled by donkey or boat, carrying goods like wool, barley, dates, and silver across long trade routes. Markets were lively places filled with shouting voices, colorful goods, and the smell of baked bread. Families lived in mud brick houses, often with a small courtyard where they cooked, kept animals, and shared meals together. Children played with clay toys, practiced simple songs, and sometimes helped their parents in the fields or workshops. Life was not easy, but it was full of rhythm, community, and tradition. Despite wars, floods, and famines, ordinary families built the foundation of Mesopotamian civilization. Was divided into clear social classes. At the top were kings, priests, and high officials who held wealth and authority. Below them were merchants, craftsmen, and farmers who formed the backbone of the economy. At the bottom were slaves, often prisoners of war or people who had fallen into debt. Each class had different rights and responsibilities, carefully maintained by law and tradition. Life brought many challenges. Droughts could cause famine, while floods could destroy crops. Armies from rival cities threatened to invade, and disease spread quickly in crowded urban centers. Yet through resilience and cooperation, the people survived. Their struggles shaped them into builders, dreamers, and problem-solvers who left behind a legacy of innovation. Picture walking through a crowded street of Babylon. Merchants shout about their goods, children chase each other through narrow alleys, and priests walk in solemn processions to the temple. Above all rises the king's palace and the temple ziggurat, symbols of power and faith. Every stone, every street, and every family tells the story of a society that balanced order and chaos, wealth and hardship. Mesopotamia lived in a world where gods controlled everything. Each city had its own patron deity, believed to watch over the land and its people. In Uruk, the The goddess Inanna represented love, fertility, and war. In Babylon, Marduk was honored as a mighty creator god. In Nippur, the god Enlil was seen as lord of the winds and destiny. These gods were not distant, they were present in every harvest, every storm, every river flood. Temples were built as houses for the gods, with priests performing rituals, sacrifices, and prayers every day. Offerings of food, drink, and incense were made to keep the gods pleased. If floods came too soon, or drought lasted too long, people believed it was because the gods were angry. Religion was not just belief, it was survival. Imagine entering a grand ziggurat, climbing its massive steps toward the temple at the top. The air smells of burning incense, priests chant hymns, and statues of the gods gleam in the torchlight. For Mesopotamians, this was the center of the universe. Greatest treasures of Mesopotamian culture is the Epic of Gilgamesh. Written on clay tablets in cuneiform, it tells the story of Gilgamesh, the king of Uruk, and his search for immortality. The tale is filled with friendship, loss, and the eternal question of what it means to be human. Gilgamesh fights monsters, journeys across deserts, and meets the immortal flood survivor at Napishtim, only to learn that eternal life belongs to the gods alone. This epic is not just a story, it is the first known masterpiece of world literature. It reflects the hopes and fears of an ancient people. Themes of friendship, death, and the search for meaning still speak to us today. Just as Mesopotamians listened to storytellers by firelight, we too continue to wonder about the same mysteries of life and death. Other myths explain the creation of the world, the cycle of seasons, and the battle between order and chaos. These stories gave meaning to a dangerous world, offering comfort and called the cradle of civilization because so many firsts were born there. They invented the earliest known form of writing, cuneiform. They developed mathematics based on the number 60, which is why we still measure time in 60 minutes and a circle in 360 degrees. They created detailed star charts, predicting eclipses and tracking planets. They built the first wheeled vehicles, used bronze tools, and organized trade networks that stretched across continents. Their legacy shaped not only their neighbors, but also future civilizations like the Greeks, Persians, and Romans. Every time we write down a contract, keep track of time, or study the stars, we are following in their footsteps. Picture a Mesopotamian scholar sitting at a clay table with a reed stylus. He carefully presses wedge-shaped marks into a tablet, recording numbers, words, and ideas. This simple act, the scratch of stylus on Mesopotamia, is the story of humanity's first great experiment with civilization. In the land between the rivers, people built cities, invented writing, created laws, and honored gods who shaped their world. They struggled against floods, droughts, and wars, but through resilience and imagination, they laid the foundations of human culture. Though their temples have crumbled and their empires have fallen, their influence still echoes in the way we measure time, write stories, and build societies. To walk through the ruins of Uruk, or Babylon is to step back into the beginning of history, where humans first asked the big questions: who are we? Why are we here? What will remain after we are gone? This is the legacy of Mesopotamia civilization that, though ancient, still speaks to us across thousands of years. Their voices, carved into clay, remind us that the search for meaning, justice, and belonging is as old as humanity. One of the first things we realize is how deeply their lives were tied to the rivers. The Tigris and Euphrates were not just rivers, they were lifelines. They gave farmers water for crops, provided clay for building, and created fertile soil that allowed communities to grow. But the rivers were also unpredictable. Imagine this: one season, gentle rains and steady floods bring prosperity. The next, a violent storm washes away entire villages, sweeping away lives in a single night. For the people of Mesopotamia, every sunrise carried both hope and fear. Now think about our modern world. We live in the age of technology, satellites, weather apps, and science. And yet floods still destroy cities, droughts still cripple nations, wildfires still consume thousands of acres in minutes. Just like the Mesopotamians, we are constantly negotiating with nature, trying to live in balance with it. The difference is in the tools. They use canals, irrigation ditches, and prayers to the gods. We use dams, satellites, and climate agreements. But in truth, the question has never changed. How do humans find harmony? Mesopotamia lies in their legal system. Hammurabi's code, carved into stone, is one of the earliest attempts to bring order through written law. Imagine a world where rules weren't passed by word of mouth but were set in stone for everyone to see. For the first time, ordinary people, farmers, merchants, craftsmen knew what was expected of them and what they could expect from others. Of course, those laws were far from perfect. Some were harsh, even cruel. An eye for an eye was not just a saying, it was a legal reality. Punishments depended on your social class. The wealthy often received lighter penalties than the poor. By our standards, this was deeply unfair, and yet, the very act of writing laws was revolutionary. It meant that power was not only in the hands of kings but also in the words inscribed on stone. Now, think about today. Every time we debate justice in our courts, argue over new laws, or demand equal rights, we are continuing a dialogue that began thousands of years ago in Mesopotamia. Their laws remind us that justice is never completed as a journey, one that each stories were more than entertainment, they were survival. The Epic of Gilgamesh is a perfect example. It tells of a king searching for immortality, only to learn that death is inevitable, and true meaning lies in friendship and legacy. Think about that. 4,000 years ago, people wrestled with the same fears we have today: fear of death, fear of being forgotten, fear of losing those we love. Their myths explain the mysteries of the world. Why do the rivers flood? Because the gods are angry. Why does the sun rise? Because Shamash, the sun god, guides his chariot across the sky. Myths gave them comfort, order, and hope. And what about us? We may not believe in Shamash, but don't we still rely on stories? We find meaning in films, books, music, religion, and even social media narratives. The stage has changed, but the play is the same. We are still searching for answers. It teaches us about legacy. Civilizations rise, and civilizations fall. Their mighty cities Uruk, Babylon, Nineveh are now ruins. Their empires collapsed. Their languages faded. And yet, something of them remains alive within us. Writing, cities, laws, questions about life and death. Even the way we measure time in hours, minutes, and seconds has roots in their world. The Mesopotamians remind us that no empire is eternal. But they also remind us that ideas never truly die. Each generation builds upon the last, carrying forward fragments of the past. We are their descendants not by blood, but by thought, by invention, by spirit. The whisper of Mesopotamia is in every page of a book, every law passed in a courtroom, every city skyline that stretches toward the sky. They may be gone, but their voice is woven into the very fabric of human civilization. It almost feels like staring at the roots of a massive, ancient tree, the tree of human civilization. Everything we call modern life today, from writing and schools to laws and organized religion, carries the fingerprints of the Sumerians. Imagine the streets of Uruk at sunset. Children run barefoot through narrow alleys, merchants shout their offers in crowded bazaars, priests carefully carry food offerings up the steps of the great ziggurat. A tired farmer kneels by the canal and washes his face, while soldiers sharpen their bronze weapons before night watch. This is the living, breathing world of Sumer. Beyond these daily sights, something deeper is happening. The Sumerians are laying down invisible foundations. Their cuneiform tablets don't just record numbers and taxes, they preserve myths, wisdom, and memory. Without them, we would know almost nothing about humanity. Writing was like opening a door that could never again be closed. Once stories, laws, and prayers could be written down, ideas gained a kind of immortality. Think of the Epic of Gilgamesh. Written thousands of years ago, it still speaks to us today with its questions about life, death, and the search for meaning. A voice from 4,000 years ago can still whisper into our modern ears. The stories remind us that humans have always wrestled with the same fears: fear of death, fear of being forgotten, fear of losing those we love. Even now, the power of stories surrounds us. Books, films, myths, religion, they all do what Gilgamesh did for his people. They help us understand life. The preserve experiments of Sumer also echo through history. They tried kings, councils, priestly rule, and shifting alliances between city-states. In their struggles, victories, and failures, we can see early sketches of the challenges every later civilization would face. How do you balance power? How do you keep people united? How do you protect against enemies while still allowing trade and culture to flourish? These were not just Sumerian problems, they are human problems, repeated across time. Even as empires rose and fell, the Sumerian spark never disappeared. Their gods merged into later pantheons, their laws inspired Hammurabi, their mathematics influenced astronomy, and their writing became the foundation that even the most fragile beginnings of people carving symbols into clay, a priest lighting a small fire on a ziggurat, a child learning to count sheep with pebbles can grow into something that shapes the world for millennia. As we leave Mesopotamia behind, the road takes us westward. Across deserts and along the Nile, another civilization is rising, one that will build monuments so large they seem eternal, worship gods in the form of falcons and cats, and ask the same deep questions about life and death that haunted Gilgamesh. Our next stop is ancient Egypt, land of pyramids, pharaohs, and mysteries that still capture our imagination. Egypt was not isolated, it borrowed, adapted, and redefined ideas. And just as Sumer gave us the first written words, Egypt will give us monuments of stone and memory that still stand today. Sumer was humanity's first chapter, Egypt will be its grand epic.